Much has been made about Napier's record on the road. He currently sits at 2-7, but is this a really fair criticism of him? We're going to take a deep dive into the truth about Billy Napier and the Gators on the road. Now, before we get going here, I want to thank UF because I actually wanted to do this video last week, but I wanted to see how he looked on the road because I didn't want to jinx them before they went up to Columbia. So you're welcome for not jinxing you. Thank you for pulling out the victory. Okay, so UF has been a road or a neutral dog in every game that Napier has coached except for one. The one exception was Vanderbilt up there last year. He has won twice as the underdog. Last year at Texas A&M, and then this year at South Carolina. And that line was a little wonky. We were a dog for most of the week. I think right before kickoff, we might actually have been favored. But for the majority of the time, Florida was the underdog. Now, he's been favored in a lot of games at home, but he's played Eastern Kentucky, USF, Charlotte, McNeese State, Missouri, Vanderbilt. He did have Utah last year at home. I don't think that this is actually a home versus road problem, or at the very least, by saying he just isn't good on the road, maybe isn't painting the entire picture. I think that the road and neutral opponents just actually happen to be a lot tougher than the games that we've played so far in the swamp under Napier. So to date, Napier almost always loses as an underdog and wins as a favorite. There are very few exceptions to this. Tennessee and South Carolina this year, Vanderbilt last year, and Texas A&M last year. Those are the only exceptions to the rule, essentially, that he loses as an underdog and wins as a favorite. All right, so I want to take some time to talk about each one of the road games that have been played under Napier. But before we do that, I want to take a second and make sure that each and every one of you are subscribed to the channel. There is a lot of good content coming this week. You are not going to want to miss it. So do me a favor, stop what you're doing right this second, hit the subscribe button. Let's go. So far, Napier has played the following teams on the road. At Tennessee, Georgia and Jacksonville, so neutral site game. At Texas A&M, at Vanderbilt, at Florida State, the bowl game against Oregon State, at Utah, at Kentucky, and at South Carolina. So in general, the Gators have played a much tougher schedule away from the swamp than they have in it. That's going to continue for the rest of the 2023 season. Florida's going to play Georgia in 2 weeks in Jacksonville, so neutral site game. They are going to play Arkansas back home in the swamp. Then they're going to play LSU away and Missouri away before they come back and play Florida State in the swamp. So more than likely, of the 3 road games left, they are going to be dogs in at least 2 of 3 of these games, if not all 3. If Florida doesn't win them, is the narrative going to be that the Gators just can't get it done on the road? They just can't figure it out? Or should it be that they are just not to the point where they are beating teams that they aren't supposed to beat in their own house? And I kind of think some of that depends on how Florida plays. Logically speaking, losing the games that you are not favored in isn't shocking, right? I think the part that Gator fans have really struggled with is how these teams have lost on the road. And we have a recency bias in this as well. Florida traveled to Utah for the season opener. We all waited 9 months to watch our Gators, and we were pumped, right? Gator fans, that is, were shocked at how unprepared this team looked. And I think we just got more of the same when the Gators traveled to Lexington to take on the Wildcats. Same result, but different performance in both of these games would have gone a long way to really kind of dispel the road game myth. The Gators did help their case on Saturday. Even if the Gators had not been able to orchestrate their last-second heroics, I think that this game would have been looked at differently than previous road losses, at least for the 2023 season. The team fought until the end. They were never out of it. they looked relatively prepared, particularly on offense. They looked like they understood the pressure of the moment and then also were tough enough to stand in it. Obviously, the victory was the ideal outcome. And at the end of the day, that's what happened. So that's great. We got the W. You get on the plane, you leave Columbia, you have won. But even with a loss, I really do think that that performance would have looked different to us as fans than the Kentucky game and the Utah game. There's a lot of talk about how at times this team looks, lost on the road. But a factor that we don't talk about a lot is that that's probably because they're playing tougher teams in tougher environments. Utah is a very good football team. It is a very tough environment to play in. Florida had traveled all the way to Salt Lake. There's time zone issues. Their schedule got thrown off because of a hurricane. There are factors at play bigger than just they weren't prepared. I think you can say the same thing about Kentucky. Kentucky is a really good football team. And again, tough place to play. This is a young team. These are all factors in these losses. And more than that, there are numerous exceptions to the statement that Florida just looks lost on the road. Think about Tennessee last year, even Georgia in Jacksonville for the first 3 quarters, Florida State in Tallahassee. The Gators were in that game until the very end. They beat Texas A&M on the road. South Carolina, they won just this past Saturday. So, I don't know that it's a fair statement to just broadly say Florida doesn't play well on the road or Florida looks lost on the road. I think a more fair statement is Florida has played their toughest games under Billy Napier on the road. And honestly, the statement that Florida looks lost, well, we've kind of looked lost at home at times too. Think about, USF and Kentucky last year. Now, have the Gators had some road struggles? Yes, absolutely. But is the road the reason for the struggles? Honestly, I don't think so. At least not fully. I think that saying it's all about being on the road really doesn't quite tell the full story or paint the full picture. UF needs to continue to improve in a lot of areas. They're doing that in many ways. Being 5-2 is something that I think most people are kind of surprised by. Remember, UF has a Vegas over-under of 5.5 wins on the season, and they're already at 5 wins. The rest of the season obviously isn't going to be easy, but if UF's offense can continue to find its rhythm, if we can have games like this offense played against South Carolina, they are going to have a shot in most games. Florida needs that defense to step up, to continue to improve. Maybe we can channel that defense from the Tennessee game. But this is a team that is going to be in a lot of the games that they have on the back end of the season. Guys, it's bye week, but it's not bye week here. We've got a lot of content coming your way, so make sure that you are locked in with the channel. I appreciate you all, and go Gators.